Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the York series. Sitting within North Yorkshire, York is a very historic place with 31 civil parishes within its city boundaries. Here's one of them for your enjoyment. The sun is definitely up now, folks, and it's starting to warm up here in the city of York. Welcome back to another episode in the city. We're in the southeastern corner of York today. Behind me is an industrial estate. There used to be a windmill in this village, and this is called the Millfield Industrial Estate, and you'll find it in Wheldrake. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Time for one of my favourite villages so far in York. Welcome to Wheldrake, which is located 7 miles to the southeast of the city. This is the most southeasterly parish in the city's boundaries, lying as it does right on the border with Selby and with the East Riding of Yorkshire. Now, speaking of the East Riding, Wheldrake used to be in it until 1974. By the district of Selby, it ended up in York in 1996, and I've a feeling I've said that before somewhere. Dates are uncertain, but Wheldrake was established at some point before 1066, and after being largely in the possession of Fountains Abbey in the Middle Ages, it became part of a landed estate until the mid-20th century. It has a significant conservation area and a nature reserve of international importance. Named Wheldrake Ings, it's located a mile to the east of the village. Wheldrake is very residential, very much a commuter village. Most of the employed people who live here commute to York. Once upon a time, they were able to do that using Wheldrake railway station, which still stands, just not in this village. It has a primary school, a church, a shop with a post office, and a pub called the Wheldrake Arms. It used to have another pub too, which was named after a racehorse. There's quite a few notable features in the village, including a water tower, which is almost exactly the same as one in Dunnington. There's lots more to see, so let's go and walk, guys. We begin on Millfield Industrial Estate at the western end of the village. As I said in the intro, Millfield is indeed a reference to a former windmill, which no longer stands. Instead, this area now sports a range of light industry and commerce, including Wheldrake Classic Cars, who sell, buy and repair, well, classic cars. The business has some links to motorsport too, particularly the GT Cup Championship. If you're familiar, their drivers are James Kellett and Alex Stevenson. Now, if you like angling, a hop across the road will take you to Westerly Lake, a small family-run, adult-only touring caravan park with coarse fishing. This is as close as we can get to the park for obvious reasons. It's private property. If you're a keen golfer, Swallow Hall Golf Course is nearby too. Just along Main Street from this area is the site of the former Wheldrake railway station, which you might remember still stands at Merton Park. Now, as circular as this route is, it's quite a difficult one to piece together. You've got one main street, which is where I'm stood now, a street to the north, and a street to the south, which meant it was kind of difficult to sort of know where to go. I think I've done a good job though. Let's carry on. Here's Cafe Valeria, a popular little cafe offering an authentic Sicilian experience. They've recently opened a new branch at the York Designer Outlet. Now we're heading up North Lane into one of Wheldrake's many residential areas. I was surprised just how residential this village is. It has a mix of housing styles, but a lot of the streets off North Lane are dominated by bungalows. Some of the newest houses can be found on Braithgate, that's this street here. This area has a neat little green space. This is the closest thing the village has to an actual village green. Wheldrake seems to lack one of those. However, it more than makes up for that fact with its sports and recreational area. Located off Broad Highway at the end of Braithgate, this has many sports facilities which are all centred around the village hall. Wheldrake Juniors play here. They celebrated their 25th anniversary as a football club last year. Well, I don't think there's going to be much football played on this pitch at the moment because it's very waterlogged. I've nearly just fallen over because it was so wet and I slipped. Thankfully, I did manage to stay on my feet, but I'm sure you would have all laughed if I caught it on camera. Anyway, as well as the football club, there's also a cricket club, and there's the cricket pavilion over there and the tennis courts, which you've just seen as well. We're going to head across this playing field. There's an entrance the other side over there somewhere, and we're going to rejoin another road. So we've now joined Greengates Lane, and where that meets North Lane you'll come to Wheldrake's primary school. You might remember from the Thorganby episode that Wheldrake and Thorganby share a school, thanks to the latter no longer having one. The school moved to its present location in 1973. Outside we have the parish notice board. We're officially halfway through York, folks. 16 down and 15 to go. Tick it off. This is the point then that we turn around and head down another residential street called Courtney's. This is a long road, but walking its whole length is required because it will form a neat little loop back onto the village's main street. Again, this is another area dominated by bungalows, but when you hit a footpath at the end of it, linking it to Beck Lane, more houses appear. There are some more substantial landmarks on the way next, guys, I promise. Very wobbly surface here. This may fall over. I'm hoping it doesn't. Anyway, right, we've hit Church Lane, and this is where you can pick up a bus. The number 18, which runs to Home upon Spalding Moor. There you go. If you need a bus, that's the service number you need to get to Wheldrake. Right, let's turn the camera around. Here we go. We're going to head down Church Lane, which is so named because the church is on it. This row of relatively new houses line the southern side of Church Lane. I would imagine these stand on the site of a former chapel because it's called Chapel Terrace. A few steps away on the other side we have a care home. Named Somerset House, it can cater for 44 residents. It was likely to have been a rectory or a vicarage because next door is St Helen's Church. The oldest part of this is its tower, which originally dates from the 14th century but was rebuilt in the 15th with larger stones. In the late 18th century, the church was in ruin, and the nave was demolished and rebuilt in brick in 1779. That's why this one looks a bit unusual. Described by Pevsner as handsome, rectangular and well lit, its interior has a Gothic appearance. In the 1970s, its Victorian stained glass windows were replaced with clear glass. In the churchyard you'll find a small war memorial. There's also a tablet inside too. Speaking of which, let's go in and see what it's like. Okay, so this church is open, so we're going to have a look around in here. This has to be one of the lightest churches I think I've ever seen. Because as you can see, it's all natural glass. There's no stained glass. There's a little tiny bit in one or two of the windows. So let's have a walk around the church then and see what we can find. Modern floor, modern pews as well. Let's head up to the what is effectively the chancel. Very echoey in here. Very echoey. It's a cavernous building. Here's the organ. Right there. The altar. Now there's a big board behind the organ. I'll see if I can get round there and show you what it says. It's narrow through there. That's the Ten Commandments. Okay, let's go this way. There's some other things on the walls. There's a crest there. It says 1779 on it. George the III is the cipher to the left. Let's go down here. There's a tablet I saw on the wall just there, which we'll catch in a moment. There's a font at the back. Octagonal job. Little war memorial wreath. 3 bells were hung December 1920 in grateful memory of the following men who died in the Great War. These men. 5 of them. And there's something else about the bells here. Look, the Kathleen peal. This bell was given by Phil Marrison in affectionate memory of his wife Kathleen, who passed away in 1991, a regular worshipper in this church for the last 20 years of her life. That's nice. There's a bell dedicated to a regular worshipper. Speaking of the bells, they'll be up there. You just heard them ringing in the last couple of shots, didn't you? Now then, this tablet on the wall over here. This is for Sidney Smith, the rector of this parish from 1887 until 1911. Strenuous worker and constant friend of many. So yeah, there you go. That's the parish church here in Wheldrake. Next to the churchyard is White Rose House, which was originally the village primary school. It's used now for girl guiding, amongst other things. Across the road we have Wheldrake's former post office. The village still has a post office, and I'll show you where in a few short moments. In the 1700s there were 5 licensed alehouses in Wheldrake. The current pub, the Wenlock Arms, was built in 1856 and it replaced 3 of them, the Red Lion, the Blacksmith's Arms and the County Hospital. Over the road there's the village shop, which also doubles as the current post office. After this we then dive down a footpath to catch Wheldrake Water Tower. This no longer has water in it and it was sold at auction in 2010 for £28,000. There's a similar water tower to this in Dunnington. The big difference between them is that Dunnington's has been turned into a very unique house. Okay, so now we're on Back Lane South, which is the street to the south of the main street. And from here, it's really just a walk back to the car via a little right-hand turn and a left turn back onto the main road, and then back down to the industrial estate where we started. Might be a few more things to catch between here and there, I don't know. We're soon going to find out. The last part of the walk takes us back to Main Street via this little footpath, which brings us out close to one of Wheldrake's listed buildings. Listed as one entity, this is number 53 and 55 Main Street. Timber framed, these cottages date back to the 16th century. All that's missing really is a thatched roof. The former phone box is close by. It's been a while in York, but here in Wheldrake, this one's used as a book exchange. Our last major landmark is a former pub. At 31 Main Street is the Alice Hawthorne, which has now been turned into a private house. It was named after an 1840s racehorse. Alice Hawthorne was one of the greatest of all time, winning over 50 races over the course of 5 seasons. And on the walk back to the car, I passed this little stall which sells flowers. It's always good to see the locals doing business, whatever it may be. Okay, so we're almost back to the car and I've just taken a perch on this bench here, which was quite handy because I needed to change my GoPro battery, so that came off at the right time. Okay, there are 2 major things we haven't talked about yet here in Wheldrake. One of them is coming your way via a special section, and that is Wheldrake Wood. Centuries ago, Wheldrake and the surrounding area would have been blanketed by a huge woodland. Not much of that woodland now remains. To the north of the village is Wheldrake Wood, and you might think this was once part of it. However, this is fairly recent, having been planted by Forestry England. It's largely coniferous, featuring Corsican pine and Scots pine, as well as larch and some areas of spruce and fir. There's also a great number of individual trees and small stands of oak and birch, as well as a few rarities, such as a giant sequoia. It's a good place for exercise. There's plenty of informal footpaths through the woods and lots of small streams too. In total, it covers some 300 acres. It has its own dedicated car park too, located off Broad Highway. From what I understand, Wheldrake Wood is quite popular as woods go, so if you're planning a visit, it's best to get there early to enjoy the peacefulness it offers. Located around a mile to the east of the village is the Wheldrake Ings Nature Reserve. A popular area for walkers, this was an ideal spot to finish this one off. This is the Ings Bridge, which crosses the River Derwent. The current bridge has been here since the 1960s, when it replaced an old one. Wheldrake Ings is the only piece of York to lie on the eastern side of the Derwent. By default, that makes it the most easterly point within the City of York's boundaries. The Ings themselves are areas of flood meadow along the Derwent which flood seasonally. They are rich in wildlife and mainly recognised for their significant collection of birds. Wheldrake Ings is just one part of a collection of flood meadows which line the Derwent's bank. You might recall some other Ings in the Thorganby episode, which are located immediately to the south. Collectively known as the Derwent Ings, they were designated as a Site of Special Scientific Interest in 1975. It's almost as if they sent a welcome party. I've been here 5 minutes and all these cars come across the bridge. I was like, what's going on? Nothing to do with me. They've gone somewhere else, off into the Ings, don't know what they're doing. So I can't tell you how important a floodplain like this is to the City of York and to the surrounding villages. When it floods, and we've seen the Derwent floods pretty badly in places like Sutton upon Derwent, this is where all the water goes. And it's invaluable. It's invaluable because otherwise it would just flood homes, it would flood businesses, it would just make a mess of everything. Wheldrake Ings is, without a doubt, one of the most important places in York, and that is saying something. Okay, we are done with Wheldrake. That's it. I'm done with this one. I'm moving on to my next one now. Do hope you've enjoyed it and I hope the weather holds out for the next one because it's absolutely glorious. This might even come off in the next episode. It's starting to get towards that time of year now where I don't need my coat on as much. I can walk around in my shirt and feel a little bit more human, because sometimes this is quite restrictive, especially when it gets a little bit too warm. Anyway, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot. This has been the Parish of Wheldrake, and I'm out.